that now, because of course the sun moves slow and everything from our perspective takes fucking forever. So here we are at this stage. We're getting the peak of the activity. Unlike standard academia's understanding of a bell curve and us being at the top of the bell curve, I don't see it that way. I think that the math tends to argue that the result would be much more like a reverse J. And so we'd reach this peak and then fall very rapidly into an equilibrium state as things adjust, absent the push of this intense level of energy. So it's very much like once you step 2 feet beyond the real ring of hot from the fire, you cool down fairly quick. And that's what I think is going to occur here. If that's the case, then we should see a fairly rapid return in stability. If we estimated that it took 2.25 centuries to get us to where we're at, and we were dealing in small fractions, the Vedic math would say that our return to, quote, new normalcy, and let's put new in front of that because it's not normal that any of us have ever lived through, that should be occurring in less than 20 years. And if we start that in 2013, well, we'll be reasonably stable within the middle of the next decade. So that's good news for everybody that makes it that far. If I'm correct. And if I'm not there, or if I'm there and I'm wrong, you can come and kick my butt. That's just fine. Good news relative from Dr. Bhat's math. If anybody really wants to get into it, I can point you to a certain mathematic formula that you can apply yourself and do your own arithmetic, and we can see where we're at, see if we disagree. Let's go into some personal stuff here. Fairly quick, or trivia, let's just call it that. Turns out that if you took all of the ex-Catholics of the planet and put them into their own denomination, they would be the third largest religion in the world behind Hinduism and Mohammedanism. So, interesting bit of fact there. Now, also, speaking of the Catholics, the Catholic Church is going to be undergoing, from our data, I know this is going to happen relatively soon. We've passed the November 9th period in which we're going to see or which we can't see. It's not visible at the moment, but I'm quite convinced it's ongoing. There's this grumbling, if you will, within the internal form of the Catholic Church, within its infrastructure, that's ongoing at the moment. We're going to see a huge outburst, truly an eruption of a corruption come out of the Vatican real shortly, that it will in the future be able to be pegged as the beginning of its death throes. So that's something to look forward to. That is also temporally very close to the next significant shift in the global economy. So it'll all happen at once, or not at once, but we'll perceive it that way, that it'll all be coming very close together. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Okay. So a couple of things. George Ure had mentioned mudra, and I got a lot of questions about the mudra and so on. And to a certain extent, he's correct in some of the things he was saying, but I advise everybody to be very, very, very careful of mudra. The word actually translates as seal, not gesture, but like a seal that one might put on an envelope, or a sealing up of a building or something. In the mudric or yogic sense, though, the seal is a period or a hard stop or an implementation or an execute order placed on a series of commands that are embedded within the hand gesture itself. Because bear in mind, the hand is not stationary during mudra. The hands move, and so they form, if you will, a sentence. That the mudra itself, the captured formal ending position, is known as the seal, or the activation, or we can think of it as the execute command in computer programming language, because basically you do a series of movements of the hand which are interpreted by two parts of the brain. The linguistic component actually feels it as a phoneme. You can actually do hand gestures such that an individual will feel as though they've been communicated with through their language center. They will feel as though they've actually heard words, but in fact there's no words that are transmitting between the two of you. But at the same time, it's going through the visual part of the mind as a grapheme and is being interpreted as graphemes that are then shifted over to the phonetic or to the language section of the brain and interpreted as phonemes. It's a very interesting thing itself, and in fact could be considered to be, quote, magical. It is a technology. The mudra, like all technology or all weapons, can be used two different ways. You can use them for good or bad. You can use them for healing, calming, et cetera, et cetera. But they also can be used for the opposite, the disturbing, the unbalancing, obscuring, and so on. It is a dangerous practice to take up the use of the mudra without understanding what you have to do in order to effectively use this technology. This is one of those things where a lot of people will do a lot of harm playing around with fire because they're unaware of the deeper implications of the mudra themselves, not only on others but on themselves, because bear in mind, you go through the process of, quote, casting a spell in the mudra in terms of sending out a command in the hand movements. But you must or should think about those because you're going to react to them themselves. You are part of the computer process that is programming the reality through the mudra. So be very, 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 very careful. And most people are idiots and will get themselves into trouble with this. Now, let's shift from mudra to mood. So everybody who's on psychiatric meds and many people that are self-medicating, schizophrenics, heavy pot smokers, all of these kind of individuals, cocaine addicts, and so on, may be responding at some level to what could be considered to be a false emotion that is driving their behavior, and that behavior, the depression that leads them into taking the anxiety or the panic attacks or any of that leads them into taking the psychiatric medicines, may have at its core an actual amino acid deficiency. I know from personal experience these last 4 or 5 months that I've been that culminated just a couple of months ago and was actually very nice of Universe to get me through that before I had to face the health issues with Kathy, and which also probably is pretty close to the same in the sense that she's also suffering some amino acid lacks. But in any event, so I know personally that the lack of these amino acids can cause the brain to experience emotions that are not valid, and you get into an emotional state that is self-reinforcing, and it affects your diet, it affects the further intake of the amino acids, and so on. Also, being a vegetarian, this places a greater, basically a vegan, it places a greater degree of emphasis on these essential amino acids and the non-essentials. So here's what I need to say, and a lot of the stuff I'm going to tell you can be found in a much more coherent and cogent form in a book called The Mood Cure, or Mood Cure. It's a really good book. It's written by a woman who's had some experience with it. She lays it out for you in a very straightforward way with lots of case studies, and there's even little questionnaires so that you can find out where you fit within this. But basically, here's what we're looking at. 100 and some odd years ago, a wild turkey would have 18 to 40% more tryptophan in it, which is an essential amino acid for humans, and is a neurotransmitter and helps maintain mood stability. And so if you shot and ate that turkey, you'd get enough tryptophan, and you'd be able to build that in your body. These days, farm-raised birds do not have the tryptophan levels that they used to. They, in fact, may be virtually tryptophan-free insofar as their wild cousins from a couple of hundred years ago. This is also true of any animal that is raised by man for food consumption in our modern society. Our collective food body has been polluted and destroyed as an aspect of our going through the end of the age, the Kali Yuga, all of that kind of stuff, and as also an aspect of our being shoved about by the sun, and it's altering its relationship with us and changing the energetic pattern of our planet. All of this stuff is expected. So, the Mood Cure relates the human body to its emotional state, to the amino acids that provide it, then the basic neurotransmitters that allow that mood to exist. and we find, for instance, that here's a real good example, and this is a solid, concrete example that I personally have suffered, as does Einstein. Now, Einstein never wore socks. Well, I used to wear socks. I had no problem with it. And at some point in the past 25 years, say 1999 or so, I got to the point where I could not. And I didn't understand it. It crept in on me. I just stopped wearing them, and it was no big deal. I never really, because of everything else that was going on, it was so trivial that I never really stopped and examined its import in my life. But it altered my life over these past 12, 13 years. You know, you'd get cold toes and so on, but that really wasn't the issue. It was that I couldn't stand the pressure of the socks on my legs. Aha, I say now, because that is a sure sign of a deficiency in a necessary amino acid called L-methionine. L-methionine provides vein support. It allows you to grow good veins. As a side effect or a side component to not liking to wear socks, I had also started to develop varicose veins. You've developed, if this is your situation, you'll notice that as a male that these varicose veins are appearing on the inside of your knees, in that area, or in other sensitive, thin-skinned areas in joints. You might get a little bit of varicose veining in the ankles or up in the hips. Well, it's an L-methionine. It was, in my case, a shortage. Once I started getting adequate levels of that, my legs started strengthening again, and the vein support was there, and took a couple of months, but I can wear socks again, and the varicose veins are gone. Basically, the tendency for those veins to kink up and become varicose has gone away because it was an amino acid deficiency. Now, as a vegan and suffering through these, especially these past 4 or 5 months, as Kathy and I have been working through many issues, a lot of them relating to the psychiatric meds and her health, I've had a less than adequate diet, and my amino acids got really terrible, and I got into a mental state that was not good. And it wasn't that, I'm sure my thinking was also affected, but it was primarily hormonal or emotional. And so once I get my amino acids or get my meds adjusted, I'm doing fine. Actually, as a side effect of this, I don't need as much of the THC for the arthritis. The arthritis does appear to be lessening, and so maybe that was also a side effect of years of a slow degradation of essential amino acids. Now, here's our problem. I'm not alone, and even if you're a meat eater, you're going to be suffering a lot of these effects because the meat you eat is polluted. Plus, you're taking in a lot of chemicals. If you're a standard sheeple or close to it in your diet, you're taking in a lot of chemicals that affect your ability to absorb the amino acids. So, for instance, if you have a too high of an omega-6 level, which is the case with almost anybody who doesn't consume fish all the time, and if you consume fish all the time, you're getting too much mercury, which leads to the same state. But without the omega-3 to omega-6 balance, you cannot effectively absorb essential fatty acids. Since your brain is almost a 100% essential fatty acid, this is a very key element for your mental health and your ability to navigate what we're going through. So it's necessary that we get our diets correct and we get our view of reality adjusted through our diet before we start screwing around with all these psychiatric meds. It is my understanding now that if I had really pressed and understood, which I could not have, the universe wanted us to learn this way, but I'm basically saying that 20 plus years ago, when we first started encountering depression tendencies in our relationship with Kathy, then maybe at that time we should have understood it, that it was a result of her diet causing the inability to absorb essential amino acids. That at the time was probably some form of diet soft drink, because of the pressures on in our society on women to always be thin, and look where it's led. A huge number of women are vastly obese, clinically obese, morbidly obese, because of the consumption of these damn diet products, all of which cause the body to not absorb the food that it should be absorbing. And we're in a period of time where our food doesn't have the nutrients it needs to be providing to us, and so we have to really look elsewhere. So, for instance, some of the sources of the amino acids can be now found in supplements in pure forms that are non-animal derived. The reason that I say that this is important is because animal-derived substances were going to come in with lots of levels of pollutants, mercury in fish, all of the potential for mad cow disease and everything else from the beef. Plus, by the way,